Aldmeri Dominion eugenicists once labeled a half-human's face a mild facial deformity. Meanwhile, wood elves eat every fallen enemy equally, no exceptions. This is the Elder Scrolls racism tier list ranked. Starting at the bottom, the Bosmer. Their green pact bans them from eating plants, so they eat meat specifically. They eat fallen enemies. Every race, no exceptions and no preferences. The thing is, that's technically the most egalitarian position in all of Tamriel. F tier, equal opportunity cannibalism. Next up, the Khajiit. 17 distinct moon sign birth forms from house cat Alfik to mammoth-sized Pamar, and somehow that biological chaos produces the least racially opinionated species on the continent. The thing is, when your own race can't agree on what a Khajiit even looks like, judging other races becomes structurally difficult. They'll trade with Dwemer slavers, Imperial legions, and Daedric cultists inside the same market week. Coin is the only purity test that matters in a Khajiit caravan. F tier. Profit-first neutrality isn't enlightenment, it's just good business. Now the Argonians. Centuries of Dwemer chattel slavery treated as legally sub-sentient, classified alongside livestock, and their response was to invade Morrowind in the Fourth Era and burn house dress holdings to ash. The An-Xileel nationalist movement is technically xenophobic on paper, but when your nationalism emerged from being property, political scientists call that something different. And honestly, the histories probably told them to do it, which makes it less racism and more divine scheduling. F tier. Justified revenge isn't prejudice, it's a receipt. Orcs have been ejected from the elven racial pantheon, cursed by Trinimax's transformation into Malakath, and despised by literally everyone in Tamriel simultaneously. Their strongholds operate on strict isolationism. Outsiders are turned away unless they contribute labor or blood. They interbreed with reachmen. They have no unified political ambition beyond being left alone. The thing is, when every faction hates you and you hate them back equally, that's not a racial hierarchy, that's just being universally unpopular. F tier. You can't be a racist institution when you're everyone else's punching bag. Bretons are half human, half Durini elf hybrids, and unlike every other human race in Tamriel, they actually brag about it. While Nords are busy rejecting elven blood,
no! God, please, no! No!
Bretons built their entire cultural identity around theirs. They're shorter than other humans, naturally talented in magic, and genetically positioned as Tamriel's most progressive bloodline, which sounds noble until you realize that pride in mixed heritage is still pride in heritage, and Breton nobility spent centuries quietly scrubbing the elf half from official genealogies anyway. More on that later. For now, D tier. Participation trophy for trying. Red Guards trace their warrior lineage back to Yokuda, a continent they sailed from after destroying it in a sword art catastrophe, which already tells you everything. Their distrust of magic users is cultural doctrine. The Anse sword saints considered spellcasting a spiritual shortcut, and that bias quietly extends to Altmer mages, Dwemer conjurers, and basically anyone reaching for a staff instead of a scimitar. The thing is, this isn't oppression infrastructure, it's gatekeeping fierce, inherited, occasionally exhausting gatekeeping. No slaves, no apartheid districts, just intense ancestral pride and a deep suspicion of anyone who didn't earn it with a blade. Low mid-tier. The Empire doesn't call it conquest, it calls it civilization, and that's the tell. The Third Empire spreads across Tamriel with roads, legions, and taxation infrastructure, then defines civilization as whatever Cyrodiil already does. Colovian administrative law, imperial cult temples, septum currency, conscription quotas. Subject races don't get a choice. Conform, pay, or get annexed harder for the good of the Empire. The thing is, nobody's technically enslaved. Nobody's confined to a slum district. The paperwork looks generous. It's supremacy with excellent branding, the kind that writes the history books afterward and describes itself as mutual benefit. Red Guards, Nords, Argonians, all culturally flattened under one beige administrative standard, smiling the whole time. Benevolent, expansionist, completely convinced it's doing you a favor. C tier. Bretons have magic in their blood, literally. The Durini elves left them that genetic gift somewhere around the First Era, and the Breton nobility spent the next several centuries quietly pretending that never happened. Official genealogies, scrubbed, elven surnames, Bretonized, heritage documentation that conveniently stops just before the pointed ear relatives show up. The thing is, they kept the magical aptitude. Just deleted the invoice. Self-directed ancestral erasure, performed with paperwork and polite silence to protect status built entirely on the inheritance they officially denied owning. C tier, but make it personal. The Dwemer didn't just think they were better than other races, they thought they were better than gods. Every other civilization in Tamriel, Dwemer, humans, all of them worshipped something. The Dwemer looked at that and officially classified it as primitive behavior, fellow mayor included. The entire theological framework of Tamriel was, to them, a mass delusion held by intellectual inferiors. They built underground cities of unprecedented mechanical sophistication. They conducted soul research that remains unreplicated thousands of years later. They literally attempted to engineer their own apotheosis using the heart of Lorkhan in 1E700. And then every single one of them vanished simultaneously. Not conquered, not displaced. Gone, the species that declared itself beyond consequence got erased so completely that nobody can even explain how. The homework they did on everyone else, they forgot to do on themselves. B tier. Now the Dwemer are gone, which creates a philosophical vacuum right on time because whatever they left behind kept torturing people long after the lights went out. The Snow Elves were a sophisticated Mer civilization. Architecture, governance, theology, then the Nords drove them underground in the Merethic era, and they made the worst real estate decision in Tamrielic history by asking the Dwemer for refuge. The Dwemer said yes. Then they fed them toxic fungi until they went blind. Then they enslaved them across generations. Then they selectively bred them toward feral obedience until the original Snow Elf phenotype was functionally extinct. Knight Paladin Gelibor, the last uncorrupted Snow Elf, is still standing in a Skyrim chapel in 4E201, completely alone. The thing is, the Dwemer didn't just oppress the farmer, they manufactured a lesser species from a greater one. Racism achieved as engineering. A tier. So the Dwemer engineered a lesser species from a greater one. Clean, efficient, thoroughly evil. But that required infrastructure. What happens when regular people just decide they hate elves because the Thalmor exist? Nord anti-elf populism is exactly what it sounds like. Common Nords in 4E201 conflate the Thalmor's supremacist foreign policy with every elf they pass on the street. Dunmer refugees from the Red Year, Bosmer traders, anyone with pointed ears. Roth Stonefist will walk up to a Dunmer dragonborn in Windhelm and explain with full civic confidence that their kind isn't welcome, not Thalmor agents, a refugee. And this isn't fringe behavior, it's ambient. It's embedded in Stormcloak rhetoric, tavern conversations, and city policy simultaneously. Ulfric didn't invent this hostility, he just knew exactly which lever to pull. Street-level bigotry with political air cover. C tier. Stormcloak leadership, though? That's a different conversation entirely. So Ulfric Stormcloak didn't invent Nord anti-elf sentiment, he just ran for office on it. The Stormcloak Rebellion, framed publicly as a fight for religious freedom and Nordic sovereignty, is doing something more specific underneath. Ulfric's Windhelm, the ancient Nord capital, the oldest human city in Skyrim, operates a functional ethnic zoning policy with zero official paperwork required. Dunmer refugees from the Red Year, some of whom arrived decades before 4E201, were funneled into the Grey Quarter. Windhelm's oldest, most deteriorated district. Argonians aren't allowed inside the walls at all. Dockside shacks, that's the offer. The stated justification is that Skyrim belongs to the Nords, which sounds like a heritage slogan until you realize it's also active municipal policy. Ulfric never visibly corrects any of it. The segregation runs itself because the ideology already did the heavy lifting. This isn't ambient street-level bigotry with no structure behind it. This is ethnic nationalism with a castle, a war, and a succession crisis wrapped around it as political cover, wrapped in a rebellion flag and calling it freedom. B tier. Though Windhelm specifically, that city has two separate racist housing policies running simultaneously, and they deserve their own entries. Dwemer refugees started arriving in Windhelm after 4E5 the Red Year, when Red Mountain erupted and made Morrowind functionally uninhabitable. They needed somewhere to go. Windhelm gave them the Grey Quarter, the oldest, most deteriorated residential block in the city. No timeline for leaving, no path to a better district. Generations later, their grandchildren are still there. This isn't informal. It's not just where they ended up, it's where they're kept. Residential segregation enforced not by written law but by municipal indifference and cultural hostility, maintained so consistently it functions identically. Rolf Stonefist harasses Dwemer in the street by name. Nobody stops him. The city's leadership, already ideologically committed to Nord primacy, has zero interest in correcting it. And this is only half the Windhelm housing policy. The Argonians didn't even make it inside the walls. A tier. Same city. Worse story. Next. But the Dwemer at least got walls around them. Argonians in Windhelm aren't assigned a deteriorating district. They're not assigned anything inside the city at all. Legally barred from entering Windhelm's residential walls entirely, they're permitted to work the docks loading cargo, freezing through Skyrim winters, then required to sleep in dockside shacks outside the city boundary. The Grey Quarter is a slum. The Argonian dockside arrangement is a step below that. Same city structured hierarchy of exclusion, with Argonians occupying the floor beneath the floor. And apparently Windhelm's leadership looked at refugees sleeping in harbor shacks in a Nordic winter and decided that was fine. Policy achieved. The thing is, this isn't ancient history. In 4E201, it's still running exactly like this. Nobody reformed it. Nobody tried. S tier. Apartheid with 2 tiers and 1 postal code. Still inside Morrowind, but the machinery shifts. Windhelm exports its bigotry through policy and poverty. The Tribunal Temple exports it through scripture. In 3E427, the Tribunal Temple, the official state religion of Morrowind, classifies every non-Dwemer as an outlander. Not slang, a legal category. Outlanders face restricted land acquisition rights, are barred from certain shrine rites, and exist under a baseline presumption of suspicion codified into temple doctrine. Wrapping institutional xenophobia in religious language is a genuinely elegant move. You're not discriminating against a person. You're simply following the will of the tribunal. Very different. Obviously, no angry mob required. No Rolf screaming in the Grey Quarter. Just quiet paperwork and holy text confirming your kind doesn't quite belong here spiritually or legally. High B tier. Apartheid with a blessing attached. And if you think religious justification for racial hierarchy is creative, wait until you meet House Telvanni, who skipped theology entirely and went straight to magical Darwinism. House Telvanni didn't bother with temples or paperwork. They had a cleaner philosophy. If you're powerful enough to take something, it's yours. If you're not, you were never meant to have it. That's it. That's the whole doctrine. Telvanni wizard lords, some pushing past 3,000 years old, through pure magical augmentation, built tower cities grown from living fungus, claimed territories by personal might, and kept Argonian and Khajiit slaves not as cruelty, but as natural order. The weak serve the strong. Obviously, this is fine. They're wizards. The thing is, this isn't angry street-level bigotry. There's no Rolf screaming about Ashkin. It's colder than that of fully systematized eugenicist logic where slavery isn't moral failure, It's taxonomy. Religious racism at least pretends to consult a god. Telvanni skipped the middleman entirely. Solid A tier. Darwinism, but make it arcane. House Telvanni at least had the decency to dress their slavery up in philosophy. House Dres didn't bother. House Dres of Terror built its entire agricultural economy salt flats, saltras plantations, Kwama egg mining on Argonian and Khajiit chattel slavery. Not metaphorical slavery, not magical Darwinism as taxonomy slavery. Actual, documented, legally protected chattel slavery. The kind with slave markets and acquisition raids into Black Marsh, and it stayed legal. For centuries. Slavery in Morrowind remained on the books until King Helseth's edict in 3E 427, and even then the great houses Dre's loudest among them actively resisted the ban. They'd built too much wealth on bodies to give it up over something as inconvenient as a law. The thing is, karma kept receipts. When the Argonian An-Xileel invaded Morrowind in the 4th era, the enslaved didn't just escape. They burned Dres holdings to the foundation, every Saltras field, every Kwama mine, every property built on generations of unpaid Argonian labor. Gone, House Dres spent centuries treating people as livestock. The livestock came home. Solid A tier. Economic racism with the poetic invoice attached. But here's the thing, House Dres didn't invent Dwemer slavery. They inherited it. The entire apparatus was baked into Morrowind's legal code long before any single great house monetized it. Dwemer society classified Argonians and Khajiit not as prisoners, not as war captives with some marginal legal standing, but as beasts, legally subsentient, the same category as a Gar or a Strider. You didn't own a person. You owned livestock that could speak. And the institution survived 3 imperial eras without serious challenge. The Septim Empire, the same civilization busy exporting order and civilization to everyone else, looked at Morrowind's slave markets and apparently decided that was a local cultural matter. King Helseth finally outlawed it in 3E 427. The Dwemer nobility's response was essentially to keep doing it quieter. The thing is, even the abolition was less about moral reckoning and more about political consolidation. No grand speech, no reparations, just an edict that the great houses mostly ignored until Argonian forces made ignoring it geographically impossible. Morrowind built an entire civilization on a legal fiction that people were animals. Solid A tier, and somehow that's only the second worst thing on this list. The Aldmeri Dominion didn't just want Tamriel, they wrote it into official foreign policy and then started filing the paperwork militarily. The Great War ran from 4E 171 to 175. 4 years of Dominion armies pushing deep into Imperial territory, sacking the Imperial city itself, and forcing the Empire to sign the White Gold Concordat, a document that banned Tylos worship across every province the Empire still controlled. The Dominion didn't conquer Tamriel outright. They just made the Empire legally agree that its own founding hero wasn't a god, which is, somehow worse, the Aldmeri Dominion's stated mandate isn't regional influence or trade leverage, it's Altmer rule, every position of authority in a unified Tamriel occupied by elves, specifically their elves. They sent armies to enforce that opinion, won enough of the war to humiliate the largest empire in recorded history, and then quietly kept building toward round 2, and they framed all of it as restoration, reclaiming what was always rightfully theirs. The oldest civilizations in Tamriel returned to their natural stewards. That's not conquest. That's apparently just correcting a clerical error. S tier. And if that's the official government policy, wait until you meet the internal enforcement wing. The Thalmor aren't just the most xenophobic wing of the Aldmeri Dominion. They're the most xenophobic wing of a race that already made the top of this list 20 seconds ago, and somehow they still deserve their own entry. The Thalmor operate as the Dominion's internal enforcement, cast secret police, purity judges, and eugenics board rolled into one robed bureaucracy. They don't just believe in Altmer supremacy, they administer it. Caste structures, bloodline audits, theological purges. Tylos worshippers across Skyrim quietly disappeared into Thalmor interrogation cells throughout 4E201, documented in dossiers written with the calm detachment of someone filing expense reports. The eugenics angle is where it gets clinical. Altmer purity isn't a vibe for the Thalmor, it's policy. Half-human ancestry doesn't disqualify a candidate outright, but ESO lore quietly notes that human facial features register as a mild facial deformity. A deformity. They medicalize the existence of other races. But here's the thing. Their entire theological endgame, reversing the creation of mortality and returning Altmer to pre-creation godhood, requires unmade mortals. The very humans and mongrel elves they despise are the raw material their transcendence depends on. They need the people they want gone in order to leave. That's not a superiority complex. That's a codependency. S plus tier. The only entry on this list that managed to make racism a logistical cell phone. If you made it through all 20, subscribe. Apparently you have opinions about fictional racial hierarchies. We're done here.